All right. Well, good afternoon. It's good to see many of you, several of you. This is the first time I've seen you in a while, in person, not on a screen. So this is a great get-together. So thank you for coming and joining us. I'm Tom Quadman. I lead the Global Innovation Policy Center at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And again, thank you for joining us today. Global consumerism has changed rapidly over the past few years. During this time frame at the Chamber, we've also seen striking changes in the way that we work, the way that we advocate, and the way that we collaborate with law enforcement. We have found that partnerships between the U.S. government and the private sector work. We are fortunate to have such strong partnerships at CBP, DHS, the National IPR Center, and other key interagency partners. At the Chamber, we pride ourselves on being agile and thinking creatively about policy solutions. That's why we're particularly pleased to engage in information sharing initiatives such as a Memorandum of Understanding with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. We believe that this MOU is a model public-private partnership. The Chamber believes that critical information sharing frameworks are needed for efforts to protect trademarks and brands. To that end, we encourage Congress to pass the INFORM Act this year. The INFORM Act will modernize our consumer protection laws to better safeguard American consumers from the sale of counterfeit and stolen products. Enacting this legislation will mandate verification of a seller's identity as a deterrent to the sale of stolen and fake goods by nefarious criminal networks misusing online marketplaces and provide law enforcement with additional tools to stop and prosecute these criminal rings. We support the inclusion of the INFORM Act in the final version of the Bipartisan Innovation Act, but if, as it appears, those negotiations continue to stall, we are supportive of using other legislative vehicles to achieve this goal. Today, we are proud to bring together such a vibrant group of U.S. government officials and brand owners to think strategically about our current challenges, build upon our recent policy successes, and assess what's ahead for this community. So to preview our agenda, first, we'll start with our distinguished guest, Executive Assistant Commissioner Highsmith. Next, we'll hear from Director Mancuso from the National IPR Center. Then we'll hear from experts from Amazon's Counterfeit Crimes Unit and Global Brand Relations team about how marketplaces are partnering with the U.S. government to make meaningful changes. Lastly, we'll have a strategic discussion about brand protection and innovative ways to combat criminal enterprises. Now I'd like to introduce Executive Assistant Commissioner Anne-Marie Highsmith. Ms. Highsmith oversees a diverse portfolio of trade enforcement, security, and facilitation to enable legitimate trade and protect against risks to public health and safety. From 2013 to 2021, Ms. Highsmith served as a Deputy Chief Counsel for CBP, where she was a Chief Operating Officer and directed a staff of 400 legal professionals in 31 offices nationwide. In 2020, Ms. Highsmith served as Acting Chief Counsel for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. In that capacity, in a trying year, she provided effective leadership for the agency's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, ensuring public safety and the security of the national food supply chains while protecting American jobs. In 2013, she served as the Acting Associate General Counsel for General Law in the Office of the General Counsel of the Department of Homeland Security, providing leadership and timely practical legal advice and guidance to successfully implement over $3 billion in sequestration. A native Californian, Ms. Highsmith began her legal career in 1992 as a staff attorney with the U.S. Customs Service at the Office of the Regional Counsel Long Beach. So, Executive Assistant Commissioner Highsmith, the microphone is yours.
All right, thank you. All right. It is very good to be here with you all in real life, and so good to see so many of my friends and colleagues here. You know, sadly, you know, as Tom's outed me, this has been a very long career. I'm just about to hit 30 years, 30 years with the agency. Over the years, a lot has happened, a lot has changed. But you did hear, I started my career with the Customs Service in LA Long Beach. And so since the days that I started working for the agency, the commercial portfolio, duties, taxes, fees, import, export, and intellectual property protection has been a big part of our job. And throughout my years with counsel's office, I was involved in a lot of enforcement activities, working with our criminal investigator colleagues, but also in legal actions, supporting the agency's work to protect our brands. I was just telling a story to Anna that when I moved my offices here to headquarters, I had this moldy old file in my file cabinet, back our old government brown pressed paper files, right? And the case was titled Ralph Lauren. And it was from the early 80s. There's only a couple pieces of paper in it, but one of them is a letter written on a typewriter and signed by Mr. Lauren himself, asking the agency to protect his brand. So, right? So I've carried it around with me all of these years because it does remind me of the critical importance of what we do. You never know. It's easy to see when you look backwards where it started, but at the first step, you don't know. And so it's important to take every one of these issues very seriously, and so we do. And so to me, it's a privilege to be here with you all and to perform this job. And I'm very grateful for our, as Tom said, our public-private partnership. It is critical to what we do. We can't succeed without it. This is my third speaking engagement today. And, but to emphasize in this room with this audience that public-private partnership is the linchpin for our success. There are things that we can do by ourselves in the government, right? There are things that we have to do by ourselves, but this is something that we cannot do by ourselves, right? So the MOU that was mentioned with the chamber is the first of its kind. It has turned out to be a game changer. I keep checking in with the staff about how is that going with the exchange of data? How is that going with I participated in the Christmas campaign, the Shop Smart, right? I'm much more comfortable now in front of the camera, so next year we're going to be better. Right? Well, it's true, right? All those years in the counsel's office, if I was ever on TV, something had really gone awry. Right? Really gone awry. So I'm getting used to it. And I know we have another campaign coming up for back to school. And so I'm looking forward to participating in that and amplifying those results. So, we like to say at CBP we can't seize our way out of this problem. And, I sort of, in full disclosure, I co-opted that sort of phrase with regard to the Uyghur Act and our forced labor acceptance. But the theory is the same, and the theory being that we don't want to stop the merchandise from entering the commerce. We want to stop the merchandise from being made in the first place, right? We want to create enough deterrence. And so because we don't want the stuff to come here at all or be made, then we need cooperation. There's a lot of this stuff is happening, as you know, in the dark, in the storeroom, in the warehouse where we can't see it. A lot of it is very sophisticated. I remember in LA when we started getting video games, right? And the code had been stolen, right? But how is my CBP officer going to know that standing at the border, right? Super important to protect that intellectual property, right? But how do I do it? And then later on with the iPhones, right? How is my officer standing at the port going to know if this is counterfeit or not? And that's where this partnership really started to come into play back in those days. And Do I need this? Do you think? Let's do an experiment. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. That the donations acceptance program is an important part of ensuring our partnership is running at full speed. Recently, and I remember we the lawyers, of course, we were losing our brains about a regulated party donating something to the agency, but it was this little device looked kind of like a shoebox, and we were able to tell if the code had been stolen. If it was Nintendo's code, we could tell, and so that's how that sort of started, and that now has been amplified. And so I'm encouraging all of our brand holders to continue to participate in that. You know, Nike has participated in, donated really some of their proprietary technology to aid us in authenticating merchandise quickly, right? We don't want containers of counterfeit merchandise sitting around. So Nike recently, last year alone, we seized 13,350 seizure lines of footwear for Nike, valued at almost $97 million. And we were able to do it quickly and efficiently and get it destroyed and out of the commerce, removing that incentive, right? And similarly, Apple participated in a program with us over the holidays, part of the Shop Smart campaign. I love this. It was called the Operation Apple Peel. It was great. Focusing on Apple products and helping, so we worked with Apple representatives to get really up-to-date information so that our officers could make those determinations about right there, is this counterfeit or not? And so it's a super, super successful opportunity. Also, I can't emphasize enough how important just the really basic, product guides and catalogs are, right? I remember litigating cases about YKK zippers. I had no idea so much went into a zipper, but we were seizing and forfeiting wearing apparel from here to Shanghai, right? For the zippers, and understanding why that intellectual property is super important, especially when you are the top dog in your line of business. Everybody wants to copy you. I totally get that. So really making yourselves available to educate our agents and officers, to help our international trade specialists be aware of what your current issues are and communicating to us. And I said to my staff yesterday, they don't have to go to the e-allegations portal if they want to tattle on something. No, we don't. They gave me a long list. Kristen is back there, Ted Schmidt, Jessica Weeks, Brandon Lord, by the way, who as of this morning, I think many of you know Brandon, but as of this morning is the newest member of the Senior Executive Service. He's been selected as the Executive Director. Executive Director for Trade Policies and Programs that has oversight of our IPR program. Kudos to Gail Kahn, who has led the ship through a really rough patch. So, but we're excited to have Brandon on board. And so for all y'all, let us know. Give us that data. This is a transparent, collaborative, cooperative government agency, and we want the information that you have. I recently was asking about some of these more novel provisions in the MOU that we have with the Chamber. The one that really captured my imagination and the MOU was signed just about when I was starting in this job. And so they were really excited to tell me all these provisions, but the one that captured my imagination was the provision about sharing information about seizure activity overseas. This is data that I can't get here, but that it makes sense, right? It makes sense that that's going to give us some insight as to what is happening. And so we have been activating some of that information. I don't have any big results to give you yet, but we are operationalizing it, ingesting it. So please keep that data coming so that we can be pulling these threads. Like Jim's over here. Yeah. Totally, right? Yeah, so super important on that. I'm only supposed to speak for 10 minutes. Anybody who knows me knows I never speak for just 10 minutes, but I'm going to try and be respectful. So how am I doing? Anyone?
Over.
I'm over?
You started late.
We started late. Okay, well, let me just see if there was something else I wanted to do. Okay. Okay, all those things, and the last thing I want to talk about, because I'm sure we're going to end up talking about e-commerce when we're up here answering questions, so I'll save that. But the last thing I want to say is urge everybody to make sure the marks are recorded. If you're representing brand, I know the brand holders, you're probably all recorded, but I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. But if you're representing brand holders, please, please, please have those marks recorded with the CBP, because it is so important for us to have that information readily available to reach out to that mark holder and say, I have a shipment of X from Y, and here's what it is. Is that right? So that we can move quickly. We know the big containers of counterfeit merchandise, they're never homogenous, right? It's never all, well, that's not true. Sometimes it's all Nike shoes, but usually it's some of this and some of that and some of the other thing. And so the ability to protect the brands is directly correlated to the information and accessibility that we get from you, with you, and collaboration. So please, please, please make sure your marks are recorded up to date and that the contact information is up to date for the folks we need to reach out to. My view is that, kind of like in the Centers for Excellence, where we have like account managers, right? That you have that same kind of relationship with our IPR folks, that we can collaborate with you on a very regular cooperative basis. And so I just really encourage you to reach out. And I'll stop. Okay, I'll stop.
Well, thank you very much, Executive Assistant Commissioner. We're so delighted to have you with us, and we appreciate your poignant comments and also the deep and meaningful partnership that the U.S. Chamber has with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So thank you for that. So now on to Director Mancuso and a brief introduction. Jim Mancuso is currently the director of the National IPR Center. In this position, he manages the federal government's response to combat IP theft, protect national security, and ensure public health and safety. He is a senior executive service member, spearheading transformational investigative efforts within Homeland Security investigations. Prior to this role, he served as the special agent in charge for HSI in Baltimore. So glad you didn't have to come too far to Washington. During this time, he led and supported more than 250 special agents, intelligence analysts, task force officers, professional administrative staff, and he enforced with over 400 violations of U.S. laws by investigating transnational criminal organizations and terrorist networks. So really the perfect background for the National IPR Center. He also previously served as the HSI attaché to the UK, Ireland, Iceland, and Gibraltar while posted at the embassy in London. And earlier in his career, he served as the Deputy Assistant Director in the Workforce Management Division at HSI headquarters. In our view, a pretty impressive background for a pretty impressive agency, and we're so delighted for the partnership that we have with the National IPR Center, and so happy for the new infused, energetic leadership at the National IPR Center. So with no further ado, Director Mancuso.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a great intimate setting. This is fantastic. Like you said, my name's Jim Mancuso, and I'd like to begin my remarks by thanking the Chamber of Commerce and Amazon for hosting this forum talking about counterfeiting in online marketplaces. In particular, I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss the benefits of public, public-private partnerships. As many of you know, the IPR Center is an important center of industry and government cooperation, responsible for the integrity of intellectual property and protecting public health and safety. The IPR Center's combination of federal and international government partners has created a unique task force that allows each partner to contribute to combat global IP theft and provides a forum from which government and industry partnerships help focus our unique capabilities and industry partnership to capabilities to increase awareness, reduce demand, educate consumers, and disrupt transnational criminal organizations from profiting from the theft of intellectual property. Now, before I discuss public-private partnerships, I would like to take the opportunity to say HSI's sincere appreciation for our partnership with CBP. In fact, when we collaborate on a case, there's really nothing we can't achieve. I'm pleased to announce that in April, HSI and CBP reported a $1.8 billion restitution, which was ordered in the Central District of California for a trade fraud investigation involving illegal evasion of duties and aluminum imports. $1.8 billion. That's the largest restitution in U.S. history, so well done. Well done. And now with Brandon, are we losing Brandon?
No, he's boss now.
Fantastic.
Great,
Because I have him in here. Right? Good.
Yeah.
So now with Brandon Lord as our Deputy Director at the IPR Center, our partnership will be even stronger. So thank you, EA Smith, Highsmith. I look forward to our partnership together and many, many future collaborations.
Same, Jim. Same.
So this past year has been an extremely productive one for the IPR Center. Our work on e-commerce has helped promote lawful trade, foster collaboration, hold criminals accountable, and provide opportunities for responsible partners to come to the table. As we move forward, our collective work has become even more critical to bringing stability to an ever-changing world. There are many aspects of illicit trade that take place online. And when I was the special agent in charge of the HSI Baltimore office, our office partnered with the pharmaceutical industry and coordinated with the U.S. Attorney's Office to successfully seize over a dozen fraudulent web domains designed to defraud individuals attempting to buy COVID vaccines, boosters, and test kits. My office also worked in conjunction with the entertainment industry and international law enforcement to investigate a major transnational criminal organization responsible for operating one of the world's most prolific illegal streaming platforms. And recently, the HSI Portland office investigated the trafficking of counterfeit goods that were being sold through online marketplaces. All these investigations are great examples of partnership at every level, working together to address the threat of counterfeit goods and ensure that criminals are held accountable. The HSI Portland case, which began here at the IPR Center, was based on information received from everyone here, from industry. The initial referral identified the defendant as an importer and seller of counterfeit EOTech products. Now, if you don't know, EOTech is a firearm optic widely used in military and law enforcement applications. The IPR Center further developed the industry referral by compiling law enforcement data from information gathered by the National Cyber Forensics Training Alliance. And then we sent the full referral to the Portland office for further investigation. What they did is they partnered, like we always do with CBP, and found additional seizures, historical seizures, linking this organization with this commodity. And with the assistance of task force officers in Portland, executed a search warrant and seized over 500 firearms components, including high-end military optics and laser aiming devices. The counterfeit goods were valued at more than $250,000, but more importantly than the monetary value was the potential threat to public safety. Had these counterfeit parts made it into the military or law enforcement supply chain, they could have caused weapon systems and other equipment malfunctions, possibly putting service members and law enforcement officers at great jeopardy. And just last month, the defendant pled guilty in federal court to trafficking counterfeit goods and is scheduled to be sentenced in September. Our partnership with private industry is essential to the success of this investigation. This case, like so many others that we're conducting in the e-commerce environment, highlights a common theme that we've all seen: criminals' use of multiple platforms and marketplaces to sell their counterfeit goods. This is why working together and sharing information are a critical part of what we do. I want to note, however, that these issues that we discuss here today cannot and should not be viewed solely as individual functions. Instead, I urge everyone to view them as a shared responsibility. We should all pursue the remedies available to us to ensure criminal organizations are brought to justice. Additionally, we should all strive to work proactively to develop tools, strategies, to train, to educate. And our collective success depends upon this. The IPR Center's e-commerce working group is an example of the success that can be accomplished when we work closely and share data. This sharing allows both government and private sector to enhance the potential for criminal investigations. I'm excited to see where the e-commerce working group's progress can go, and can't wait until we get to the finish line. Yet I need to make it clear that the working group is at a point where the private sector must decide how you wish to move forward and how you wish to formalize your relationship with each other. It cannot stop here. It's easy for us to say we have partnerships, but in the end, those are just words. We all must be willing to roll up our sleeves and do the work together. Let's put our words into action. While the IPR Center cannot tell you how to move the e-commerce working group forward, we can remind you that we, as the government, take our cues from you. And we are relying on you to set the priorities and determine a course of action. We will hear you, and we will act. Yet in the end, these discussions must result in action in order for us to effectively combat illicit trade. So, I would like to propose that we give the working group a new wind in its sails. And I look forward to working with you to reinvigorate our efforts in fighting counterfeiting. Thanks for your time.
Jim, thank you. Director, thank you so much. Anne-Marie, Executive Assistant Commissioner, it's so great to have partners like you in our government. It frankly gives us a feeling of confidence and trust in the private sector to be able to work with you and see, and Casey and I, Casey Brill's right here, we see every day exactly the effort that goes in, the rigor, the discipline, and the professionalism. And I think what we see here today is the enthusiasm behind that commitment. I'm Patrick Kilbride. I'm the Chamber's Senior Vice President for the Global Innovation Policy Center. Really terrific to be here. Thank you all for taking some time. Like Tom said, so many faces that we haven't seen in person in so long, and it's really just wonderful to see you. One of the reasons that we're here today is that the Chamber, as described, has been working in more and more depth with our partners in the stakeholder community, in government, in industry, in the academic and NGO community, and those partners have partnerships have opened new doors. One of the ones that's really blossomed is our work with Amazon and the thinking. Really, the strategic thinking that went into the recent release of the brand protection report from Amazon was sort of the intellectual seeds of today's conversation. We're going to hear from a couple of Amazon's key leaders in terms of what that report is all about. I think, instinctively, as a cynical Washington, D.C. veteran, our tendency is to think this is just a brag sheet, and that was my first assumption. Let's be honest. But reading through it, I was really struck by the depth of strategic thought that went into it, and I'd like to just mention a couple things. For instance, you're going to hear from a couple of Amazon executives, Anna Delaval and Kabaru Smith, in a moment. About the report, so I won't belabor this, but talking about the proactive measures that Amazon's employing that are outlined in this report, the tools that it's providing to brands, the accountability measures to deter and prosecute bad actors. this is not a surface examination. So, for example, when talking about monitoring of its own site, the report says that Amazon uses advanced technology, machine learning, to continually scan billions of separate listings that result in those products being stopped, investigated, examined for action. And those actions include things like, immediately removing the content, withholding funds from the sellers, and referring bad actors to law enforcement. But what's more than Amazon in its own right is acting to sue where appropriate, to work with prosecutors directly. I say this not to brag on Amazon, because they can do that themselves, and I'm sure they will do it better than I can. But I say this because I think that there's a real architecture in this report for how all of us in the business community and government can work together. This is a really layered approach. So I'm really excited to hear more about this from, forgive me for saying so, from the horse's mouth. So I want to invite Anna Dalaval and Kabaru Smith to come on up. Kabaru is the director of Amazon's Counterfeit Crimes Unit, a team of international lawyers, investigators, former prosecutors, whose mission is to disrupt and dismantle counterfeit organizations by targeting them through external enforcement efforts. So I really want to stop there for a second. It's not to put a good face on Amazon's platform, it's to disrupt and dismantle counterfeit organizations. That is important. Before joining CCU, Kabaru served in government as senior corporate counsel at CSIPS over at DOJ, the Computer Crimes and Intellectual Property Unit. And he was also an assistant U.S. attorney and assistant district attorney in Houston. He's joined by Anna Dalaval, as mentioned, the director of the global brand relations team at Amazon. And her role is to fight the battle for customer trust, leading a global team working with the stakeholder community, with all of us. I'm going to refer to them today as Anna and Kabaru. I suspect that internally they're referred to as trust and accountability, but we'll be a little less formal. So let's get started. Thank you both so much for being here. Anna, let's start with you. We talked about trust and specifically customer trust. And we know that Amazon really prides itself on being a customer-centric culture. But no matter what you're doing internally, there are those external factors that are going to impact trust, something that all of the businesses that we work with can relate to. Can you talk about some of those challenges and how you can overcome those and still maintain customer trust?
Sure. Thank you, Patrick. First of all, I wanted to start by thanking the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Can you all mute me, or should I use the microphone? It's better if I use the microphone. Okay. It's on. You can hear me better now? Okay, cool. So really, thanks to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for putting this together. Thank you for the other panelists for sharing their extensive experience. And thank you to the audience for your interest and participation. I want to go off script for a second because what I felt here is really the energy, not only the passion for combating the counterfeit issue, but for collaboration. And you can see the room lights up when we talk about information sharing and collaboration. So I'm really excited and privileged to be here with this group. So I'm Anna Dalaval. I'm the Director of Global Brand Relations at Amazon. This is a team that is in charge of working with brands, association, and other stakeholders in the brand protection industry to really educate about Amazon brand protection efforts and partner and support brands in their brand protection Amazon on our stores and beyond our stores. But also, most importantly, is hearing the feedback from all the stakeholders of how can we continue to improve improve and innovate, and really listen to what can we do better and how can we continue to contribute to this fight. Because as we heard, it's a global problem. It affects all retail. And it's a problem that none of us can probably succeed in addressing alone. We can do many things on our own in different aspects of this problem. But if we come together, we'll probably have a better chance. We know these are smart criminals. They're sophisticated. They will try and get around the protection we put in place. But for us, customer trust is very important. It's at the foundation of what we do. We want customers to have a great shopping experience. We don't want them to be worried about counterfeit product or any other type of abuse, really, on our store. And that's why in 2021 alone, Amazon invested $900 million and employed over 12,000 people to combat fraud and abuse on our store and beyond that. And I would like to say that, you mentioned the brand protection report, and it's really our effort to summarize some of these key strategies that we have put in place to fight this issue and keep trust at the center of our experience.
Is there a particular highlight that you'd like to, if you're talking to a government audience or a brand owner audience or even a customers, are there a couple points that you'd like them to really note from this report?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first of all, we continue to focus on three key areas of our strategy. This is our second brand protection report. Last year was our first effort to really come out and tell what are we doing holistically, right? Because there's so many parts of this work. And three that are very important are our proactive efforts, our industry-leading tool that really help brands protect their intellectual property on the Amazon store. And thirdly is holding counterfeiting accountable. Accountability, pardon. And fourth that we really wanted to underline this year particularly was continuing to educate and support the customer. And we heard a lot about initiative about educating the customer and how important that is.
Thank you. One of the things that really struck me looking at the report was that for every one IP infringement reported by a brand, Amazon's pulling down 1,000. That's impressive. And then accountability. I mean, Kabaru, your role is working with law enforcement and other stakeholders and doing that coordination. What does that look like for Amazon?
And I'll just say a quick hello and thank you again for having us, Patrick, in the chamber. It's good to see some old faces, Casey from the chamber and Don Nelson from IPR Center, and faces that I hadn't seen in person, but I've met during the pandemic virtually, like Conrad Wong. Conrad is a big old school car guy, and I'm still trying to buy a car from him. So maybe now I can get one from him now that he's here. But just, grateful that we can have this discussion today and come together in the room and just get to know each other, because that coordination requires human interaction and earning trust and developing those relationships. And I will add on before I go into my remarks, just going off script a little bit, that, Director Mancuso, we heard your words about the e-commerce working group. We're an active member of the working group. And the one word that popped out was action. That's what the IPR Center and that you're looking for. That's a part of your charge and your new tenure, and a continuation of Director Francis's tenure. And so we will take that back to make sure that we are mashing the gas on finding ways to increase our data sharing, not just with Amazon, but the other members of the e-commerce working group. But as it relates to our work holding bad actors accountable, the CCU is a very unique team, especially within the e-commerce space. We are a team of former prosecutors, law enforcement, and risk managers. And our mission is to disrupt and dismantle counterfeiters at a scale that's global in nature, where we're pursuing them, the sellers, the manufacturers, the distributors, the payment processors, the facilitators, the logistics providers, anyone who is a part of that chain. And over the past 2 years, we've made some real strides. And, we've had enforcement actions with our China partners, the PSB, law enforcement on the ground in China. We partnered with HSI in China who are based in Guangzhou and Beijing, where we make our referrals to them in partnership with our HSI law enforcement partners in the United States, where we've had enforcements on manufacturers and distributors of counterfeits that are ending up in Europe and in the United States. It's also our mission to sue these bad actors, to go after their financial networks and seize and freeze those funds, and to ensure that they do not have any safe harbor within the Amazon store. So we get injunctions against them as well. And over these past 2 years, we've made real strides. We filed joint lawsuits with brands such as Yeti, where we were able to serve a bad actor here in the United States who was selling counterfeit Yeti. That partnership and that relationship came from a referral from Customs and Border Protection, where they seized these counterfeit Yeti mugs in Alaska, destined for San Diego. We recently got a default judgment against this bad actor. Filed lawsuits with Ferragamo and with GoPro and with many other brands where we're sending the message to these bad actors that Amazon is not the place for that activity. We've also had significant criminal referrals over the past 2 years. For example, last year alone, we referred over 600 bad actors to law enforcement. And in those referrals, we're seeing search warrants executed. We're seeing indictments. We're seeing raids happen. For example, this past week, we saw our first indictment related to a CCU referral that was tied to counterfeit Cisco servers and switches out of the District of New Jersey. And not only did they just file a wire fraud charge, they also filed the trafficking in counterfeit goods, which we know is terribly low in our federal filings. And so our mission is to support law enforcement through data sharing in real time. When we partner with law enforcement, we can share information about IP addresses, physical addresses, banking information, where law enforcement can go after these bad actors at scale. So that is our mission, and our blueprint last year that we issued to governments and for partnerships with law enforcement and government was to make sure that we have creative ways where we can share data with customs and law enforcement. And also we encouraged a significant increase in budgets for law enforcement partners. So that's a little bit about what our CCU is doing. Look forward to sharing more, but our mission is to partner with law enforcement, brands, and stakeholders to go after these bad actors at scale.
Yeah, thanks, Kabaru. And staying with that for a moment on the accountability side, how do you measure your impact on the risk-reward incentive for these, counterfeiters and their networks? And, how do you tell if you're having a deterrent effect?
What's fascinating about our team is we, in a way, operate as a prosecution team. So many of the same areas of focus that law enforcement is pursuing, we're pursuing. We're looking for criminal prosecution and seizing and freezing of funds on the criminal side. When it comes to the civil suits, we're using these civil suits to go after the civil funds that these bad actors are receiving illicitly. But we also want to use those lawsuits as a way to send messages to would-be bad actors that Amazon is not the place. And not only we will go after bad actors in the Amazon store, but we will go after them within that counterfeit ecosystem. An example of that deterrent message, last year we filed a lawsuit against social media influencers who were using social media platforms to move counterfeits and have their followers buy counterfeits from Amazon. They basically would promote a generic good on their social media page and direct their followers to Amazon sellers who they would make the purchase and receive a counterfeit luxury item. We filed the lawsuit against those sellers, received a judgment and payment, but within days of that filing, we saw activity where other social media influencers were taking down their pages. That's a great example of that deterrent message and the impact of that.
It's interesting, and maybe some of the folks in the room can relate to this. As an advocate, policy advocate, I think we often find, or you feel like at the beginning you're fishing in a huge ocean, right? And where do I cast my hook? What kind of bait to use? You just don't know where to start. And as you accumulate knowledge and experience and data, you have a much better sense of the ecosystem, and it starts to look a little bit more manageable. And I'm curious for everybody in the room, how are we doing in that? Are we starting to really define this bad actor community in a way that we can really get after them? I feel like the tools in this report, not just for sort of the proactive vetting measures, but the tools for brands, the accountability efforts are certainly impressive. Are really important elements of that. And then, what brings it full circle, Anna, is empowering your customers, with knowledge, and one of the things I'm really thrilled that we've been able to do at the Chamber with CBP, with Amazon, and increasingly with a growing coalition of industry partners is invest in that customer awareness and education effort.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we briefly just touched on preventive measurement tools, and happy to give more information about those as well. But when it comes to education, I think our partnership this past year in 2021 with the GIPC Center and CBP on the Shop Smart campaign was great. We came up with a list of 10 tips right around the holiday shopping season, which was very impactful, right? When we know there's definitely a spike in e-commerce and other retail shopping. So that was great. Another of these education initiatives, we partner with INTA on Real campaign, and for educating younger consumer. And this was in collaboration with the Girl Scout of Greater Los Angeles. And it was targeting specifically Girl Scout between the age of 13 and 18 years old. And they were tasked with building a business and defend, and how to protect their intellectual property rights, trademark specifically, how to protect their business, and then consider how would you feel if somebody took that idea that you just created away, and what can you do to protect it? And I think we're looking really forward to continue this partnership with both, the private and the public sectors to continue and educate and make sure the customers learn about the dangers of counterfeit goods, how to shop smart, how to feel confident when making those purchasing decisions.
I think that's a great point, because a lot of the businesses that we work with are naturally reluctant to just go out with a message about the danger, right? No one, especially in industries that impact health and personal consumables, you really don't want customers to be nervous about buying your product. But what we've been able to do is say, yes, be aware, but here are some tools that you can use to be proactive, to be safe, and to be able to take advantage of the tools that we have, because I think we can't forget that, regardless of the challenges associated with, the enormous, the exponential increase in trade in small parcels, for instance, that those are bringing tremendous benefits to our economy, to our consumers, to our job creation, and that we want to protect all of this and enable consumers to enjoy it, which is why I sort of started talking about empowering rather than simply educating our customers. And I think it's great the way Amazon talks about customer trust. I think that's a foundational piece of how the Chamber with its Global Brand Council works with other rights owners, is to promote, we're not just promoting brand integrity, but we're promoting that trust relationship between brand and customer. And so that's kind of why I think this report is so relevant to not just Amazon, but all of the businesses and stakeholders that we're working with. Because I think the real benefit of being here together is to have a chance to talk with all of us. I'd like to move to the reception, but maybe for a last question for both of you, are there some things that you really saw a noticeable uptick or improvement from your first brand protection report to the second? And is there something you'd like to preview for next year? Maybe something that's happening today in 2022 that won't come out until next year's report?
Sure, Patrick. And just to close that thought, you're right about educating the consumer and how, sometimes it's like a fine line. You don't want to scare people away, especially as a brand, right? But I put myself, I'm a consumer too, right? And what do? I look at labels. I know that if something is too good of a price to be true, it's probably not okay. And so I think like educating consumer on very basic way to be a smart shopper. Also, we know we're not perfect despite all our, brand protection measure and all our improvements. Sometimes a customer will buy a counterfeit product. And in that case, Amazon has been having this A to Z guarantee that fully protect our customer for any purchase if they're not happy with the product. But when it comes to counterfeit, it goes beyond that. We actually contact the customer proactively. We tell them they bought a counterfeit products. We fully reimburse. And they don't have to do anything. It's just all done proactively. So yes, we have had a lot of, innovation happening since last year, and that is outlined in the brand protection report. To answer your question, and I think the adoption of our tool has grown. So in all those 3 areas, the adoption of our tool is grown. Brand registry has now 700,000 brands who have enrolled their either pending or registered trademarks. And Project Zero, which is our tool that allows brand owners to remove counterfeit listing directly, has also grown 3,000 more brands, so for a total of 20,000 brands this year. Our automated brand protections has scaled. You mentioned before how many billions of listing. We actually monitor 8 billion changes to the existing listing daily for sign of potential abuse. That has grown from 5 billion last year. And while we continue to scale our proactive protection, the need for brand to report has actually decreased. So we have seen a 25% decrease on valid notice of infringement. And that's really where we want to go, right? We want to do this proactively. We want to reduce the burden from brands to report, although we need their partnership. They know their IP the best. They are the experts. So we want to continue to collaborate with them. And I know there have been improvements also from the accountability side.
Yeah, a couple points I just want to build on. One is our data sharing. For example, our Counterfeit Crimes Unit, we have a quarterly confirmed counterfeit list where we share data with law enforcement all over the world, with the IPR Center, with French Customs, Chinese law enforcement. And every quarter we turn over a list, and that list continues to be scaled, and we add more information to assist law enforcement. But it deals with, it includes bad actor information like the product that was sold, their IP address, their banking information, and the last IP address used. And law enforcement around the world, we've learned from City of London Police that they've been able to create leads based on that information that we turn over every quarter. Another example, we are seeing increased partnerships with local law enforcement. For example, LA County Sheriff's Department and their CAPE team. We've had several enforcements with them. And as a part of that, we're advocating aggressively for increased funds for local law enforcement. As a former state prosecutor, I know what those needs look like, and for federal prosecutors as well. For example, the DOJ funds that help local law enforcement hire local police officers and prosecutors to pursue IP infringers. Also pushing for more funds for the IPR Center. So those are some examples of where we are advocating based on what we are seeing. And then lastly, I will say that we have recently stood up what's known as our Counterfeit Intelligence Unit. And that unit is, their specific mission is to identify evasive new schemes that counterfeiters are using to get around our gates, but also to get around law enforcement. This is a team of 3 former CIA intelligence officers who are scraping social media pages, looking at YouTube, looking at new ways that bad actors are finding to sell counterfeit goods. And we're sharing that data with law enforcement and with brands. And so as this team begins to scale their work, we hope to identify new schemes that law enforcement may not even have identified yet. And so we have so much data and so much information that our team has built up that we believe we'll be able to scale our work with law enforcement internationally, both in the United States and all over the world.
I think you put your finger on it. What I loved about this report is very impressive, but if it was just about Amazon, I think its utility would be limited to marketing, but it really has tremendous relevance for the entire stakeholder community in the anti-counterfeiting brand integrity space. And I do encourage folks to look through and see the architecture represented here in terms of the tools for brand owners being able to search for infringements, identify, report, track, in terms of Amazon's proactive measures where it's continually scanning and identifying and acting. And I think the level of detail is is worthy of continued attention and gives us a good platform for further collaboration with other industry stakeholders who maybe don't have the same scale, but can certainly benefit from the data that you've developed and the experience that you bring to the issue. That has really been the spirit of our MOU with CBP, our secondment to the IPR Center. I want to give a shout out to Ted Schmitz. I'm meeting him for the first time in person today. Welcome, Ted. So I really feel very excited. You know, Casey and I were talking with the leadership of our board at the Global Innovation Policy Center, and there's a lot of threats out there in the world to IP today, beginning with, I think, some challenges to the premise of intellectual property and the private property right in your investment and knowledge as sort of a foundational issue in our economy. But in the anti-counterfeiting and brand integrity space, I'm actually optimistic because I see how much energy there is in this room, how much expertise. And so we're really excited for the opportunity to work with all of you. And I want to thank Anna and Kabaru and the organization they represent, especially for their leadership today and throughout. So congratulations.